where we celebrate another day.
Don't say it again, he's just trying to get you to say your wife's age, don't worry.
Oh, no. He already blew that.
I really do blow it.
Your secret's safe with all of us.
We won't tell her.
Is that her birthday?
No,
Just be the
cut
minutes
that part
for
out.
the time.
It's on the tape. All right, so we're set on August 4th at 6:30 for special meeting.
Right, so I just need a motion and a vote.
Can I have a motion on that?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Everyone in favor?
Alright. And we know that the
August
date-
4th, 6:30 PM.
Yes, we know the agent will be tied up with MT. Alrighty, next. General land use matters. Discussion on ordinance 2022-21 amendments to the redevelopment plan as adopted by ordinance 2019-04. And we had discussed this last meeting, if I recall. We have a resolution memorializing ordinance 2022-21, the redevelopment.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for the attorney. After the vote, when I went home and reviewed all the documents, item 10 said there was no discussion, there was no public notice on that being out to be voted on. Does that null and void it under the Open Public Meetings Act? There was no prior notice to the public on that vote that we were even discussing. Item number 10.
And where is it, where was it stated that you read it? You said you're reading the minutes?
Item 10 of the June 13th meeting said there's no discussion agenda. There's nothing on the agenda for it. And when I went back, because I'm reviewing last month's for what we had this month, I noticed it says no discussion. And my understanding from being on various boards and being an administrator is that public notice has to be given prior to us taking some sort of action, and I know that would delay this a little bit if we didn't comply with the law. That's what I'm asking, this question. Does it require public notice prior to the vote?
Okay, I was just, is it two different questions, because the other one, Jim, you said that there was no discussion, and I know we had a lot of discussion over it, so.
Yeah, but it wasn't on the agenda.
We discussed it, it wasn't on the agenda, given public notice.
So here's the answer. If it's required, does that then call into question the authority, the approval, the authority of approval? It could if somebody challenged it. That's the answer. Doesn't look. The board can vote on anything, may take any action that's before them. Whether it gets challenged or not is a different question.
Well, but as a board member, I'm uncomfortable with the fact that public notice would, I'll challenge it.
So that's fine, and when, if there's gonna be a vote on it, then state that.
We're voting a second time tonight, is on the agenda, but and that's given public notice, but the public notice was given on the first time. And that's, I have time. To me, it's just against my brain.
And I'm saying that's, you don't, and you vote your conscience on that, that's perfectly fine. I can't tell any of the board members how they should vote.
I'm not asking you to tell me how to vote, I'm asking you, does it require public notice and a resolution to the public prior to the meeting, so they have the right to attend, question it, whatever? That's my
I
understanding.
understand, they already voted on it, the board, they already voted on it. Then it's a matter of adopting a resolution.
Again, maybe I'm confused from all the years that I've done this on multiple boards. I understand under the Open Public Meeting Act and all the courses I took on it, that you have to have public notice of what's gonna transpire at that meeting, and to bring something up that wasn't on that agenda, as far as I understand, it's against the law.
Okay, so wait, so this was voted on already, is that what you're saying? What's it before now?
There was a first vote, this is discussion for a second vote. But if the first vote was done improperly,
What was the first vote?
It was at the end of the meeting, they brought up that, this proposed amendment. And we did vote on it, but it wasn't listed on the agenda.
And the vote tonight, is there a resolution on this?
Yes, so both, items on discussion, we can discuss and then vote on a resolution that's in the board's, that's in the board packet. There's the information about the redevelopment plan in the packet that I gave everyone, along with the resolution of approval.
So,
Or, along with the resolution.
The resolution, that's up for adoption.
Yes.
So the board voted to approve it, it's just now to approve the resolution.
but.
Right, but what
as Sue
Jimmy's
said,
saying is,
being this under discussion, and
Let Sue explain it first, I'm sorry. Let Sue continue to explain.
So I know we discussed it last month and it wasn't on the agenda, but I did put it on the agenda tonight. I put it on the agenda with, the information that, you know, was gonna be the redevelopment plan and the resolution with both of those items. So, if whatever the discussion was quickly last month, let's just talk about it again and
And I
make
was
a
gonna
vote,
say,
and then vote on the resolution.
And open it up to the public.
And, right, and open it to,
But I don't think we voted on it last month. I think last month we made recommendations to send it to the governing body. The governing body had to take it and decide what they wanted to do. And once they passed it on the first reading at their last meeting, they kicked it back to the planning board. The planning board has to take it and vote on it tonight, and then it's up to them. to
right,
read it.
I never sent it anywhere.
Yeah, I think it was more of a discussion,
So-
not a formal vote. That's my recollection.
so, I mean, this
But we should
is my,
discuss it tonight.
this is my
Yes.
opinion
Yeah,
that
yeah.
Jimmy brought up a, very valid point, and this should be technically the first discussion on this, because it was in the agenda tonight.
Yes.
I don't think any of us realized it wasn't on it last month when it came up, because it was brought up at the end of the meeting. That this is the first discussion, and whatever the proper protocol is, whether it's the next meeting we do the resolution, or we follow it up with it, but this is the first notified.
So as long as there was-
all I'm asking is, does it need, this resolution need us to vote twice or once?
Correct.
That
Should
would
be
be
once. It goes once and then it goes to the governing body and votes twice.
So we can, so the answer is, and thank you for bringing all that up. You can review it again, you can vote tonight, and since there's public notice, it'll cure whatever issue, possible issue, it'll cure it. Because now there's public notice. And nothing says you can't review something a second time. It's the actual, it wasn't adopted, the resolution,
Yes.
so it's still an open issue.
And actually, I remember it was actually a pretty simple thing, and someone, was it you, Gary, that was able to,
Yeah, I
fill
think
us in on,
the
exactly
issue
what it was.
that we are looking at is the fact that there was a typo in the ordinance, which is what's been holding the M&T application from being able to be held and heard. The ordinance, when they went back and looked at it, and it was picked up by the engineer, it had the words maximum and minimum as far as the total number of acres required for a site, for an approval on that particular property, as well as other properties that are along the Route 9 corridor. Well, it's always been, since the original ordinance was put in place for multifamily housing, it's always been a requirement that you had to have a minimum of 5 acre piece of property. Whereas the original, when you go back into the ordinance, it says it has to be a maximum of 5 acres. So it was reversed, it should have gone the other way. And I mentioned last meeting, my personal, business has really been an example of it, because when I built my own apartments on, Muscat Drive, I had to have 5 acres, that was the requirement, and I met the requirement when I went into the apartments. When I just in the last year, I went back and I got approval for another section of apartments, I had 2.8 acres, so I was kicked to this board of adjustment for my approval, and, without knowing that the ordinance was wrong, I really could have come here, but I didn't come on the ordinance. But I went to the board of adjustment, got my approval for the board of adjustment. So it's really just a correction of a typo that has to be corrected before, when we vote on it, it goes from us back to, governing body. Governing body makes a decision, okay, is this right or is this wrong? They vote on it, and then at that point in time, M&T and any other applications that are in the pipeline for multifamily can be, heard before this board. So that's really what it consists of. in a
Alright,
nutshell.
so not to confuse everybody, but what Gary is talking about is the actual, under discussion, discussion number 2. That is regarding chapter 335 zoning, amending the typo.
Right.
Not the first one with the redevelopment plan, just so you all know that.
That one I'll let you discuss.
Fine, but, so just staying with,
The
again,
first one.
ordinance, governing body ordinance, number 2022-23, which would amend section 335-61B.3A is what we're talking about now.
Yes, yes.
It changes the word from maximum to minimum. But that is tremendously significant. So, I mean, you're now going, if the understanding for the last, and it's 10 years, because we're looking at 2012, the understanding was that it was a maximum tract size of 5 acres, then we were talking about a maximum of 50 units. So, now it's minimum, and we have an application for 270 units. And that's based upon 10 units per acre. The applicant, and you know, when the hearing comes here, we'll get their testimony, but the applicant, in their application right now has, I believe, a total of 28 acres is what they're alleging their tract size is. And again, that might get sifted out through testimony or whatnot. But if they had 100 acres, we'd be looking at 1,000 units. So it is a significant typo that's existed for 10 years. So, I agree with the attorney, everyone can vote however they want to, again, he can correct me if I'm wrong, we are only making a recommendation. We do not have the power to pass this ordinance or not pass this ordinance. And the governing body does not have to listen to our recommendation or not. They are still the governing body and they have the power to pass these ordinances. We merely give our opinion and they take into account whatever discussion and, you know, the recommendations we have.
Didn't we vote on this already?
But this is the one just to get the wording right.
Yeah, didn't we do that the last meeting? Well, there was a motion made.
Yeah,
Right,
but that
we
was,
did.
nothing was on the agenda for that.
Oh,
So that's what Jimmy is talking
Yeah,
about.
that's what we resolved that one, Jim, yes.
Can I just add what Mr. Reed said, and it's important. The board, when the board's asked for a review, which really what this is, a courtesy review of a proposed ordinance change, the board, yes, policy comes into play, but it's really not the board's purview. The board's vote isn't approving the proposed resolution. The board is saying, based on their review and the reliance on the professionals, that it's consistent with the ordinance. That's it. And if the township passes an ordinance, the board, it's up to the board to follow the ordinance. That's the ironic thing. The board is tasked with following the ordinance, but the board, other than the courtesy review, really isn't part of the policy, officially the policy
it's
decision.
just more like a recommendation.
Which is all, but that's the reason why, that's all the jurisdiction the board had. Not that the board doesn't have the expertise, but the board doesn't have the jurisdiction, and that's really, but all the notice issues still apply. And, you know, forgive me because I wasn't here, but again, since this was noticed, we can cure it by looking at, again, nothing says you can't do that, which is what we're doing now. Or what you're doing, really what you're doing. I'm not, I can say, but I'm really not taking any action, because that's not my purview. It's.
No, my biggest concern is when you put no discussion, the township committee does it, there'd be no, further discussion stuff all the time. But there was a lot of people here because the previous applicant has got postponed again, and then they all left. And then we're having a discussion after we agreed that not to have a discussion, which still impacts that applicant in the future.
Well, it's not just the public meeting law, it's in the municipal land use law that on an application, that it has to be open to the public for public comment. So even if nobody's sitting in the audience, it still has to be put on the record that it's open, because that could be a technical violation.
Right, and when I believe we had one of those applications that got postponed and asked for a special meeting, or if I'm not mistaken.
different now.
That's right.
That's
Well, I'm
also,
not talking a particular applicant, we had an applicant that's affected by whatever we just did, we'll do.
but that's also why the board You can't go into executive session on an application. You can caucus, so to speak, but it's all gotta be on the record, which is what you do.
Everybody-
It's exactly what you're doing now, everybody's telling, and that goes into the consideration when the board members vote, so.
And what's good about, well, I mean, luckily this has come up now with this other application in front of us, because it is a sizable one with, multiple concerns from the public. And to have this ordinance correct with the proper verbiage is very, very important. Because we know, we've been through that one before, there's some changes in this one, this minimum and maximum is no doubt a very important verbiage in this ordinance for that application.
Okay, so the ones before us, as Sue just quoted, we've got two. The second of the two is the typo. And the first is to redevelopment plan.
So which one are we discussing, or are we discussing? both?
Right now, we're on number two.
Okay.
Well, that clarifies number two, but
Yes.
I'm still concerned about the one.
You have to open it up.
If you're gonna, anybody else on the board have any more questions, comments about the second listed item under general land use matters for ordinance 2022-23, which amends section 335-61B.3A of our code?
Chris, I do. I'd like you to repeat what you said about the past 10 years and operating 10 years with maximum as opposed to minimum. Could you repeat what you said?
Well, obviously, that ordinance, or the mistake, for lack of a better word, the typo, was never recognized before. Now, again, we haven't had this size of an application before. The last large application was a 5-4 vote, it was tight. But I think, like, I'm not personally calling into question that particular vote, I think everything was done, properly on that particular application, and the vote went where it went. But, the big picture here is, if you, and it's for the board members and the public, if you have something that you wanna add, as Gary had said, then we open it to the public. And the board members have to participate as well. If you have something that, you feel a certain way, then now's the time to do it. Much like the attorney said, at the end of the day, it might not mean anything, because we don't have the authority to pass the ordinance anyway. It's your recommendation, but now's the time to do it. So if you think the mistake is a significant mistake, well, make sure you make that comment today. Same thing with the public, make sure you make that comment. Because if you don't make the comment, it will never be heard by the governing body. And that's the whole purpose of this process right now, is to make your thoughts known to the governing body, so they can take everything into account when they make their decisions. They have as much information as possible to make the decisions they wanna make. So,
And Chris, I'm new on this board, so the M&T application's been kicking around here since, what, 2010?
we have a timeline that the mayor asked for at one point. That meeting isn't until August, I'm not sure. I know Sue, we are lucky, very lucky, want everyone to know that, the public too. You have no idea what a resource Sue Connor is for this board, because she put together the history of that application. And I mean, it took a lot of work, and she got it done right away. It was very concise, it was very to the point. So we can get that to all the members, and that's something, you should review before that hearing. So I personally, off the top of my head, I can't remember, if it's 10 years or when the first application was. I wanna say the first application was made in 2005, I don't know.
And that's the other application that we postponed, 2 months ago too, because almost all the board members want to be here for that application. I mean, some things are simple, as everybody sees, they're nice and simple, clear cut, a couple of questions, but there's some of these real important ones, big ones like M&T, phase 3, there's certain ones that we all wanna be here, and especially, you know, if we got some concerns, you know, and, I know we had, I think, pushed it off in July, not July, May, because of that. So, we all wanna be here. We can't help it, it fell into the summer, and it's vacation time for so many people, especially school age kids, but let's hope it goes on August 8th, and gets heard.
Just to, on what Mr. Reed said, two quick thoughts. I kind of said this earlier, the board on these kind of things, you can't really divorce yourself from policy, but really the policy is up to the committee, they set the policy, the board really doesn't. And any positive things you see as far as the proposed change, or any negative things, the best thing to do is what you're doing now, because if you're making the right, you know, I had board members asking, can we send a letter to the town? Well, this is your letter, okay? And Kristen said it earlier too, the board, the township could say, we don't care what, I'm not saying they would, but the board, the township committee, the member, they're not bound by what this board says on a recommendation like this. But, you know, the idea is they're gonna know the board's feeling on the vote in general, and they're also gonna know the individual members exactly what we're doing. But that's what Chris was saying, is this is your opportunity to say what you think. And I tell anybody, I think you should say whatever you think, you know, that's the important thing, that's why all of you are on this board. But anyway.
No, that letter example is fantastic. I should have said it that way, but so now every board member has to know this for every hearing. This is your opportunity to talk. Don't wait, you know, there isn't any dumb question. This is just discussion. We're not held to anything. So now's the time to make sure you say what's on your mind. Because you can't write that email asking a question about what we're talking about now. If you have that, I mean, I'm not saying you don't go home and you think, oh damn, I wish I had said this. But now is the time to speak. Now's the time to ask questions, man. This is an open discussion with, nobody's trying to judge who knows more about what. You know, we're all here to work together. That's why we're all from different backgrounds and we all have different skill sets, so we can together do a very good comprehensive job of sifting these issues out. And one other point is, regardless of our recommendation, even if our recommendation was to not pass it, hypothetically, if they do pass it, we are bound to uphold that ordinance. So I wanna make that clear to everybody too. So we don't come back to a hearing one day and say, well, were we talking on July 11th that we didn't like that? Well, that doesn't matter. If there's an ordinance that's passed, we are obligated to uphold that ordinance.
I understand it. So I'm caught right now between, I was gonna save it for comments from the members and stuff, but it goes into this redevelopment. Going back to 1981, when I stood before the committee and told them that their fire plans had to be updated and everything else. We're talking about multiple units in here, and yet we depend on volunteers to make a decision that do not have the expertise of an engineer on public housing safety. And my recommendation is that we reach out and get the advice, because we're talking about if the building's over 30 feet, you have to have not fire access roads, aerial access roads. They have to be 26. You got waivers over here requesting less land. If it goes over 50 units, you have to have 2 accessible fire roads. That's gonna be an issue with that one over there. Maybe you know, they gotta have 75,000 pounds to hold up the vehicles, not only on asphalt, but any other surface that they're gonna be on. There's so many things about the firematics that nobody ever looks at. The hydrants have to be working before you can bring combustible material to the site. These are all under the international fire codes, and who do we discuss? The fire companies. This, you have to have an engineer that knows firematics and, safety. I mean, we're not only talking about the lives of people that live there, we're talking about people that respond in emergencies, especially our firemen, that, you know, when I was the police director out in Iceland, we had a lightning strike at White Gulf Mills. Within 20 minutes, 8 units were already on fire. We went to a 7-alarm thing. So when you see these, and I have many years in firefighting, I grew up in firehouses. My father was a tiller man on a ladder truck. This has to be incorporated because, you know, there's not just these 2 developments, but you're talking, if we ever get this developed,
any part of, Fenish's Farm. You're talking commercial buildings when they come in, do they have sprinkler system? How many, that's why I asked, okay, the fire truck, if the attack line is 150 feet, and they pull up in front of that building, whether they're left or right, they have to be able to reach 150 feet from that fire truck by the fire codes. So if the building makes it 200 feet, that's a violation of the International Fire Code. We were under the International Construction Codes. New Jersey adopted fire codes too. But we need an expert when we're looking at a building that's, or a complex that size, to make sure, because I know there's all kinds of waivers. Turning radius, minimum turning radius inside is 30 feet of a fire truck and 50 feet on the outside. You know, looking at plans, when they look at a fire truck from Lenoka Harbor, it's an 85-foot ladder, but their mutual aid for it covers 100 foot, the 8 foot's 112. If you design your roads on an 85-foot truck, then the 100-foot trucks ain't getting. So this will, not even talk about the number of units, which requires after 200 units, you have to have aerial access roads and stuff. Or in front of one portion of the building for that ladder truck, and it has to be unobstructed, no less than 30 feet, or no less than 13 feet, no more than 30, so when they pull up, their attack lines can go to the front doors. Well, if you look at these things, you got cars in front of them, that weighs on the entire design of the complex. And that's why I'm frustrated with some stuff, that if we're gonna amend stuff, we should have someone who has the expertise. You know, the code says fire official, oh, the chief's in charge. Well, I'm sorry, you know, and I don't know all the training, I know the training I had over the years, but you have to know the code. You gotta be certified under NFPA to make those things, so. We're counting on volunteers to make a decision that requires an engineer that knows the codes. And I think we really should reach out to, look for one of those. You could contact the NFPA and they'll tell you what to do.
That really solidifies what Chris had said, because we all come from a wide array of backgrounds. I don't have background from Jimmy, but at the same token, which I agree with him 1,000%, when we sit up here as board members, you know, whether it's the engineer's job, our zoning office or what, when we reach out for these outside agency approvals, I would hope and pray that there's the expertise is there, that they're correct when they give us approvals for these, because any of these things, when we reach out to them, I can see the wide disparity that Mr. Letelier is bringing up on a lot of their stuff, especially with fire. But I know if we get these letters from the police department, public works, different agencies give us approvals, that I would hope, and only our township officials and our engineer can make us feel comfortable with that we're getting the proper information and approvals we need when we go forth with these applications.
After 40 years in emergency service, and we have some very talented and well-trained volunteers, you're talking that the way the Section D of the International Fire Code, just talking, I'm not even talking about construction, aerial and fire access roads to respond, the location, the height, and all that stuff. Because if you can't get in there with an aerial ladder, and if you grant a waiver 20 feet, and the aerial ladder gets there and puts out a stabilizer, the whole road's already blocked. So the purpose of a 26-footer is when there's stabilizer out there, engines still could get by, because if the building down the road starts burning, and again, there's design engineers, and I'm saying that the board should have someone that our engineer can work with. Yeah, we're gonna have to pay, but you can't depend on a volunteer fireman to make those decisions. I'm sorry, they just don't have the expertise. And, you know, your building department looks at, okay, does this meet the International Building Code? Does it have this, does it have, I'm just talking about responding to the site. So firefighters can get in there, rescue people,
Thank God my officers were like Mill within 2 minutes, evacuated 8 units. The whole freaking 8 units went down. So, again, it's your first responders, your fire hydrants. In fact, as you're talking fire access road, I don't even look at the plans yet. If you have a fire hydrant on that fire access road, that road must be 26 feet wide minimum. So these are the things, so we can look at the hundreds of pages and stuff on that plan or that plan. For example, you go over there, if there's a dead end and a truck has to back up 150 feet, it needs a turnaround.
I think this is a lot of stuff that,
And you could only get from someone who has that life safety engineering expertise.
I think this is a great amount of discussion for when we have that application, and hopefully we'll have some
Yeah, but-
answers.
But
No, I think what
it
Jimmy's
has to
telling
be
you
ahead of time because
is he wants us to hire an expert to review the application and then provide us with a report as to what their recommendations are.
we're gonna grant waivers on basic things, but just like I said, oh, well, okay, there's nothing on the road stuff, the curbs and fire hydrant. Well, guess what? Under the code, if there's a fire hydrant on that access road, it must be 26 feet. That's so a pumper can get hooked up to it, and other pumpers can go by, and that pumper that hooks in the hydrant gives a relay down the road with the water.
The question would come in, because, I mean, there's a lot of very serious, important, and legitimate things this will tell you, but in a situation like this, I mean, I'm sure we should have an avenue that, we can find out these answers. But also, wouldn't this be on the burden of the applicant also?
Well, some of the times for outside agency approvals, they're not getting those until it's an outside agency. The board approves it, and then they have to come up and do this and this and this.
And there is
So-
a
In the town, is it?
You know what I mean? So the board's already approved it,
You said
and
it
then
was-
they collect their outside agency
you said it
approvals.
was- it's the fire chief's not a fire marshal?
No,
We don't have fire.
see, a fire marshal is some. It
Does
does,
the state.
The problem
I'm a
is,
certified fire marshal investigator. I testified in Superior Court in New Jersey. I still can't testify for the designs. It's just because you got a title fire marshal, all of that covers it. This is an engineering, so I essentially think, can you send it to the board, to the attorney, a package with some examples? The NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association, does all the certifications, recommendation, but they follow the International Fire Code. And under, it's not, I think the term, but section D of the fire code, it's strictly on response, and it's based on the number of units, the size. For example, if you take a large development and you go diagonally, and if diagonally is 1,000 feet, well, under the fire code, you can't have two access roads more than, or less than 500 feet apart. So, even in design coming in, like if you look at, and I don't know if we're allowed to talk about pending things,
I think we should be careful, because we're
That's
talking
why-
about an application.
That's why I'm saying in general.
Hasn't come here, so it should be a general discussion.
And that's what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
I'm talking a particular one.
Yeah.
here's the thing, I mean, I think everything you're saying is appropriate, but what you said, generally, that's gonna be the just assume an applicant, so you're right, Mr. Commissioner. We cannot be talking about an application that's not before us, so we're just speaking in general about the expertise of the official who approves the fire plan, okay? Generally, if you approve a resolution, it's going to say subject to the approval, and that is considered an outside. Everything you're saying is true, but the board doesn't really have the jurisdiction to enforce that.
No, I'm sorry, we have an engineer to advise us, does it conform to this and this?
And the ordinance doesn't address the fire aspect of things.
At all.
At all.
And so he's just
So
looking.
that's really, I'm not, just so, that's, again, that's a policy issue, really, for the committee, because I understand everything you're saying, and it's, none of it is inaccurate or not important, but really the board doesn't have, we can only decide on things we have jurisdiction, I shouldn't say we, the board can only decide things that it's jurisdiction.
But what the board does have is the other authority to hire an expert to advise us, should we vote on this, does it meet what we need to pick? I've been at this town since 1981, before the first fire hydrant. And the bottom line here is, you're looking at huge complexes coming, and once it's over, it's too late. And unfortunately, I've been on too many fatal fires, and they're not pleasant.
Well, Bruce, let me ask you this, who would be the person that's gonna review this for the fire standards? What agency?
It's usually sent off to the fire chief,
Right.
part of
But
the
again,
outside agency approval. I look at it from the size of the roads as outlined in the ordinance.
right, but that's what Jimmy's saying. Jimmy's saying, you give us a report and a review letter based upon your expertise. So right now, we don't have anybody that we can have review this and give us a report unless we hire an expert to review the application, review the applicable code, which you do by looking at our code to do your letter, and the municipal land use law. So where does that advice come from? It's not in your purview, so who's going to do it? And Jimmy's point is, we can't expect a volunteer fireman to come in here and have that knowledge. That's very, and
And
now,
both- and
are
in
we
both-
supposed to subpoena the fire chief to come in here and hopefully understand the whole application enough where he can provide testimony, whether it's agreeing with the applicant testimony or not, but for any other report, review, or testimony, the only thing we would have to base a decision on is the applicant's testimony in your letter.
Right, because in most municipalities where I do private work, it's, you submit it, and some of them have a board of fire commissioners, some of them have a fire marshal.
We haven't.
And they get, and they'll issue, like any other, government applicant, you know, like even here, the fire company can issue a letter, it's a recommendation.
It almost sounds like we're behind times here.
Well,
What-
I'm just saying,
what-
not all
no,
towns do that.
I'm not disagreeing with you, Bruce, but Jimmy's bringing up some very, very, almost scary things. And we know they need to be addressed somehow, and I think it might be time, because the town is changing, whether we like it or not, and sometimes we don't all agree even up here. But we are getting high-density dwellings, we are getting some higher buildings and stuff like that, and times have changed. And it almost sounds like, because I can agree 5,000%, this is only my opinion, that no volunteer fire chief is gonna have the expertise to address things he's never been faced with before. I mean, up until, who knows how many years ago, we didn't even have ladder trucks.
And this has
So-
only occurred in the last 10
so-
years, because we haven't had anything in town
Maybe,
that size,
maybe it's time this board recommends
or that
to
density.
the powers to be, that we need to get more, expertise or additional, outside agency
But when
to
an
look into it.
applicant comes here, they come with an engineer or an architect. Why not they come with a fire expert also? Why not, why isn't that part of the company?
Because we don't, according to what you're saying,
I
we
mean,
don't,
it doesn't have to be on
ask
every
for it.
application,
It's
so
not that you
certain
don't-
applications
I'm
are
sorry.
like that.
Alex gonna be hard pressed to find one.
It's not that you don't ask for it, it's really an interpretation of
Right.
expertise. What Bruce said, he can, the dimensions are in the ordinance or the access and all that, but beyond that, and you're in a catch-22.
And
What you're saying is the expert or the entity, the person that the board relies on, you're not questioning them individually, it's just they don't have that breadth of expertise. The problem you have is, that's the way the approval is set up.
And one of the things that we
Because
got
it
looked
becomes-
at
Let me ask you this, right
is
now.
RSIS governs all the residential, even in the multifamily.
However, the United States signed an agreement, they're part of the international construction code. And in that is the international fire codes, which everybody uses. I mean, some towns adopt them, some states adopt the whole thing, but so when an application comes in and it goes to the building inspector and it goes, okay, yeah, you got your firewall here, ready for this and that. That's part, okay, you need smoke detectors here, this is all part of that. You need multiple access in or out, depending on the size of the building, square footage. But there's nobody in the building department that has that expertise to say, and it doesn't matter what your code says, because state law, which the state of New Jersey, 2015 adopted the international code, amended in 2018. The international code was just amended in 2021. These are international to make sure people are safe. There are experts, and I could go to the NFPA site, and there's a couple of authors out there that write on this particular safety and all that stuff. They review stuff. We need someone to review it. Just as, Bruce may be able to say, okay, well, the International Fire Code says this, your turn radius is 20 feet, it has to be 30 feet. Your hammer intersection or Y intersection has to be this. Your grade under, here's another, the grade coming into it cannot be steeper than 10 feet over, or 10 degrees over 27 feet, because otherwise, because fire trucks has an extended front end, extended back end, they're gonna bottom out. There's so many things. You can't have, traffic calming devices such as speed bumps and stuff on a fire access road, because guys are gonna get thrown off. And it's not just these developments. The one over here, I don't know, it just skipped my mind.
Remember, we're talking.
No, I'm not talking that one, I'm talking about the one that's already approved, the one department. No, they're not an applicant. Just can't see the name of it.
Seabreeze.
Seabreeze, that's it. Has, I believe, well over 200 units.
Yeah.
Well, that falls into the thing, just like the gates are restricted for access to private, somebody's, because if they're not high enough, you take them off the top of the fire truck. These are things, I mean, I could read it and tell you everything, but I'm not an engineer, so I can never testify, and I'll send you a copy of the section, and it specifies, I mean, it's right here in black and white, it doesn't take rocket scientists for the committee to adopt it. It just needs someone, an engineer, that can say, yes, this complies to these codes, and I'm sure you're capable of some of the offices, but it has to be looked at. You can't just hope and pray that it's gonna not happen.
And RSIS covers some of that, but not to the degree.
Well, but I'll send you a copy, and
Okay, I'd appreciate that.
it's plain and clear, and included to be some of the NFPA, some samples, but and it's right in it, it says the curbs, the cul-de-sac, if the truck has to go more than 150 feet down, you have to have a turnaround. It has to be somebody's circumference, all that stuff, because they don't want a fire truck backing up 150 feet. And once it goes over a certain number of units, you have to have 2 fire access roads, not 1, but 2. And then, if there's, the buildings are over 30 feet from the ground, you have to have aerial access roads, which are, like I said, 26 feet, not 20 feet. So, I just don't want us to find us in a situation where we say, holy shit. We lost a lot of people.
And that's a perfect example of why when we sit up here, we rely on the experts, whoever it is, that give us information, feedback, because that's all we can look at these applications, make our decisions on where things right, wrong, or what makes them. We don't have the information, or the information isn't detailed enough. I mean, there was a lot there. I know you've been sitting there
If I
patiently.
may, I'm gonna bring it back to the ordinance, which was the changing of the word, right, from a maximum of 5 acres to a minimum of 5 acres. And just, I wanna make sure I understand this. And taking that application as a whole with 28 acres and applying 10 units per acre, that's how we get to the 270. Because we're looking at the 28 acres, which includes the commercial portion of the development.
Right, but
And
we're not talking about the application right now.
No, but when that ordinance was initially written, when we did it as, an amendment to the, master plan, it was intended to be a minimum of 5 acres. It was so that there would be a large enough tract of land that you could put a multifamily dwelling on it, or grouping of buildings.
That's what I
That was
wanted to
what the
hear. That's
intent
what I
was,
wanted to hear.
and then somehow during the codification of different things as they went through the amendment process, they mixed up the word max and min.
But wouldn't that be taken care of through the density line of the ordinance? I mean, if you're saying it's 10.
And the answer is
10,
yes.
yeah, so you can say what the intent was 10 years ago, but, I mean, the language is clear. If they said 10 acres, 10 units per acre, well, then the tract size, why would it even need to say a minimum?
Because it was
Because-
intended to minimize all the tracks along Route 9. That they wanted them to be a substantial size of a minimum of 5 acres, so that they wouldn't be doing it on a 1 acre parcel.
Yeah, and it
But it's
also,
10 units on 1 acre, that's
No.
what the code is.
But you're not gonna have.
yeah, they didn't want it, just like Bruce says, we didn't wanna have small townhouse and condo popping all over Route 9. There's also something in there where it had to be at least 500 feet off of the highway. Because again, you wanted to preserve your commercial corridor and not end up having a multifamily home there.
Well, like I said, I mean, we're looking at recommending a redevelopment. I mean, I would like to see that, and I think you'll understand when you just go down and listen reading, and I interpret it, but again, I'm not the expert.
Well, I'm going through one right now in another town where I'm doing a townhouse development.
Well,
And I had to provide the fire access and the this and that, and the other, and the turnaround.
right, and as long as we have someone, and again, once he sees what I'm talking about, there's no reason this town doesn't adopt it or amend its ordinance to include that, so there's no ifs and buts in the future, unless the codes, statutes change, and
I think what Bobby said is the most important. We are lagging behind, there's no doubt about it. Some of our ordinances have to be brought up to speed. Master plan, I know we've talked about it over and over again, should, be updated. And we argue about it all the time when we get applications like this, our parking requirement is not enough. Because when you get these developments built and you have 1.5, per unit, it's just not enough parking. Because they're taking into account the garage, which we all know nobody ever can fit a car in the garage. So I think those things, maybe a list from the board to the, governing bodies, and look, we gotta address these items, because if this is gonna continue, down the road on other parcels, we gotta be able to handle this.
And that's one thing that did happen, like what Chris mentioned earlier about the, one that's in process now that went to a 5-4 vote. And there was a tremendous amount of discussion and everything, but it did bring up one of the points that Gary just brought up, because of them trying to use the garages, which before the next one came up, the township committee had already addressed that. No longer can these big developments like that count the garage as a parking space, because of the reasons we had discussed previously. So this is, I'm amazed at the amount that you brought up, Jimmy. I've learned a lot just sitting here, listening to you, and that's the one thing, right now. I mean, the town's been through different stages through the generations. Some of us have been here, a long time, so we've seen more than we've wanted to see. But with the change, we gotta change and adapt. And there's things being, forced down our throats, whether we like it or not. There's different things that we have to adhere to. When we get elected and put on these boards, we have to abide by the ordinances of the town. Sometimes we may not even agree with what we're voting on, but we sit up here to listen. If they meet the criteria and they're, and the ordinances, but at the same time, we gotta recognize change. We're building, we have to have these high density dwellings, and with that, we have to look at things a little differently. So, this was really educational tonight, and we gotta start looking more into, especially now that these are starting to pop up.
and again, my understanding of law, state law supersedes any ordinance, and state law has adopted the international fire codes. So therefore, you're required under state law to see it form. And I'm very confident that he can look at it, because we're talking turning radiation, access to the building. Like, can you look at something, can you have cars parked in front of
the entrance to the building? No, because they have to have an unobstructed entrance, no less than 13, no more than 30, because if a ladder truck sits there, or a tack truck comes in, they're going to the doors. If they gotta wiggle in between cars, parked cars, bicycle racks, and the other thing, I mean, you can't have overhead obstructions if it's in aerial access, no power lines, everything would have to be under, but that's all part of the code. Sue, can you make sure that person, everybody gets,
Yep, I'll send a copy.
and just so, I mean, it's clearly defined, but we don't have anybody reviewing it, so that should be reviewed, and it should be recommended by the board that the township adopt it as part of their lives. So it's still state law, you gotta comply to it.
And the thing is any of these applications come up, even on subdivisions and stuff like that. I mean, so much of what you're even saying is discussed, turning radius, this, that, and everything else. You're getting into a lot more detail than we normally get into. But a lot of them questions, you know, whether it's yourself or somebody else, garbage trucks, emergency vehicles, whatever, it's always discussed. So, to tell you the truth, I would have never had any idea that it's more detailed than what's brought before us when we're hearing an application, because the emergency services always are brought up, the fire trucks and everything else, but I have no clue of 26 first versus 30 feet or whatever it is.
Fire truck.
Well, see, here, well, like I'm saying, the average pumper, and again, and this is something the town should have done, every manufacturer, a Pierce versus a Hahn, has a different turning radius. Is it a cab over or a cab crew cab? That has a turning radius. Is it an 85-foot truck or a 100-foot? You can't go with Lenoka, because Lenoka, if there's a major fire, they're just gonna give mutual aid. Bayville's 112, Fork River's 110-foot ladder truck, or what they call platform trucks. And so each fire truck, but just the code specifically says the minimum inside turning radius of the fire is 30 feet, maximum, a minimum outside's gotta be 50 feet. That's getting in there. You drop that, they're gonna jumping over curbs, or they got backup. And like I say, each manufacturer, when you buy the truck, the town buys the truck, the specs are there, the turning radius, but they don't have a standardized thing. North, they have all maps. So it's standardized for North, they know what they're doing. Plus, it's been there for about 300 years before fire trucks. But a general rule of thumb, and I'm very confident that you can review, but I don't know if you got the time to review them, but they should be reviewed by you or someone.
It's easy to incorporate that into the review that I do.
And so you'll have it, like,
For any upcoming applications.
yeah, because he's gonna review anyway. And that's a big thing, but I'm still saying that the town should adopt the international codes, and if you feel you can't, we as a board should be able to say, okay, here's a list of experts you can contact.
Yeah. Hypothetically, if we made that a condition of approval, hypothetically, who would enforce that condition, that the applicant does in fact comply with the ILC, International Fire Code? Where would that, we don't have fire prevention, the fire
I
marshal.
don't know where you would find that, because I don't know, I've never encountered anybody that.
It's still back to Jim's concern, it's still gonna fall on the fire marshal, or the fire chief. And his concern is that that individual isn't qualified, or has, I don't wanna say not qualified.
Right.
Doesn't have the breadth of experience that an engineer would.
So it's still-
But if I have that, the turning radii of the ladder truck, I can check that.
But that's something that our applicants, the shame of it is listening to all these numbers.
And we can provide that to the
Exactly.
applicant now, that if we have it.
Yeah.
Because that's how I get it from other towns, is as part of the review, the fire person sends out a copy of it.
Well, the engineer, that's drawing up.
And then I have to revise it.
Applicant needs to know this going into their application, because just looking at some of these applications, to meet what these policies are, everything they spent on engineering and drawings is out the window, because the streets aren't wide enough, the buildings are in the wrong spot, there's not enough turning radius. And this brings me back to what I was saying earlier, it's something that's gotta be brought forth before because a lot of these designs that are brought up before us
Well,
don't meet
and
a lot of the
and
criteria
you've got
what he's
other
talking
opposing
about.
things that are going on. You've got the CAFRA aspect, but they're trying to narrow everything down. And the fire trucks that are trying to, or the fire companies that are trying to widen everything out.
It's still, but bottom line is, it's still state law, they adopt it.
So if we get,
Also CAFRA.
so if we get
Right.
bigger fire
And,
trucks.
and
let's
what
go.
you'll find is the DEP is always at odds against half the agencies out under the sun.
No,
If we find that the
like I said,
applicant
but-
can't do the.
Bruce, at least give us a recommendation back, would you, if you can handle it, you can handle it, as long as someone's looking at it, because every,
Provide me an all
when you
incorporated.
go down there, you'll see every type of intersection, wide, what they call the hammer, the T, the curves, and specified, right?
Bruce, I think you can make it a general requirement without having to itemize. And once it's in the review letter, the board can make it, the board can certainly make it a condition of evaluation and compliance. But I think what you're saying, Chris, is who's now gonna look at it and say,
When we do resolution compliance.
it's great, it's in there, it's in the resolution, they have to comply, but
Bruce can't do it.
Who says they comply? But I think,
Well, Bruce does resolution compliance.
Right,
But,
he
but I'm not
couldn't do
gonna
the
be an
fire.
expert
but I think if
in
it's,
that area,
if it's,
if you're looking for that.
I don't think you're gonna solve this all in one, but if it's in the resolution compliance, at least it's a start, okay? At least it's there. And if Bruce has it in a review letter, then this is what Bob was saying. Now it's part of the proofs of the applicant, and it's up to, I mean, look, every board does this. We go pretty quickly through, but really, they have to prove all the elements of the application. Now, if it's not something that's a variance or a waiver, as long as it's a permitted use, they're in compliance, but you could put it in there. I think that's a start, and I think then the next thing is you've got the mayor and Dennis to, they've gotta communicate that to the committee as far as.
Well, and it's important because when you just said, when you're designing these things, well, let me squeeze 5 pounds or 10 pounds into a 5-pound bag. And they're saying, well, if I get this waiver, it's this, and if I get this and this. But again, I don't care if they should check with the state fire codes. I mean, the bottom line is, we have to protect not only the people that are gonna live there, but the people that are gonna respond.
Well, that's what that's why we're here, to make sure that all boxes are checked off, and
So you'll go
hopefully,
back tomorrow and
so when we review these applicants, whether we say yay or nay, we're confident in that our residents are
there's
gonna be
in there,
safe.
there's a package from the NFPA, a letter from a expert.
And Mr. Chairman, I don't think it's nobody, it's no fault of any individual. I think this whole discussion, the township has growing pains. This is part of your transition. And, the whole state, including New York, we're all moving south, so, as time goes on, the population grows.
But I'm saying, the applications that may be coming before us in the near future should be held to these standards. I mean, it's very simple. I don't care if they gotta be designed, or if we don't grant waivers, if they don't comply to that standard. And so once you're aware, the board members are aware of it, you can go read them yourself. It's pretty clear, but you gotta be, I'm not an engineer, I can't design a site.
What's good about this discussion too is us as board members just sitting here and listening to the information you're bringing forth educates us, even if it's not put forth automatically, it takes time to get things settled. But now we know to look harder at fire safety and different things, and we're probably gonna be referring a lot of things in your direction. Was there any other board member, I know there's some people in public that want to speak, but any other board members got anything to say on this?
Either matters.
Either one, no?
Just a comment on the
Yes.
redevelopment ordinance. It strikes me curious that we're passing something to redevelop land that hasn't been developed.
We'll move this
Just to
trees.
answer that question, the whole area over there was determined to be a redevelopment area. This was an add-on for some additional stuff to help the township comply with the state's affordable housing requirements. That was the whole purpose behind
Which
it.
keep changing, correct?
And in order for the town to get their town center designation, they, for lack of a better word, forced to do this. And that's why there is all these affordable housing apartments in different sections of the town that were forced upon Lacey Township to comply with the affordable housing act. And the things were just, there were the additions, I wasn't here last month, but I know they were just minimal changes. One was to 12 units instead of 10. One was to 35 feet, even though they're only going to 35, or 3-story, even though they're keeping it a 2-story.
Were they named as, was the town named as a defendant, or they're just complying?
The town is the owner of the property.
No, in from the state, from the fair share of housing.
I
We were involved
defer
for
to
years
you.
involved.
It's either they've already, there's already an order, or if they don't, then they're gonna get,
Well, as part of the town center that just got adopted within the last year and a half,
Right, and I think
they had to comply with those things in order to get the adoption.
we're sort of mixing issues there. So I think what the question we just then was, is there already an order, quote unquote, settlement with the township and courts for the
No.
affordable housing obligation? And I believe the answer to that is yes.
they were. So if they were,
I don't think it was an order, I think it was a settlement.
Settlement.
yeah, but that's an order,
Yeah.
Yes.
What, just because you said you pretty much have to, if there's an order, then you definitely have to, because other towns could be complying because they don't wanna be sued, but if there's already a settlement, then the town is obligated to follow. The settlement would have been reduced to an order anyway.
Yeah.
Right, so there is an order which is separate from the plan endorsement aspect of it. Now, is there overlapping? Of course, but I personally wasn't part of the settlement or any of that. I don't know how it came about or what the proofs were or what happened in front of the judge and how the settlement came about, that was approved and reduced to order. But is there alternative methods to reaching this magic ordered settlement affordable housing unit number other than this, pretty involved process of redevelopment, the naming that a redevelopment area? Again, I don't know what the individual, if the town had to go out and buy all the properties from the individual owners. I don't know what the process of that was or the cost of that was. And whether or not all of that was absolutely quote unquote forced on us, or were other alternative methods of satisfying this court order number evaluated and decided that, no, this is the best way to do it. I don't think anybody, if anybody on the board knows those answers, I'd love to hear them, but,
The town really kind of kicked the can down the road for a lot of years, and it got to the point where the town had to take and address it at a certain point in time. And we were able to work with, the folks at Affordable Housing and come up with a plan, which ultimately got approved. But the plan keeps growing as the town keeps growing, we have more of an obligation. The town buys the land and the town works out with the developer. Like Bruce said, there's a lot of stuff around town, but the majority of it is behind town hall.
it's right there.
But one clarification, what Bruce said, that going from 10 to 12, the 12, it's still 10 units per acre. The 12 is only to allow the development of the building in 12 units per building, because it's more, contiguous when you build 12 units versus 10. So that's that one change.
Thank you for the clarification on that.
Is there anybody from the public that is beyond on these issues we're talking about right now?
Broad issues.
Just what we were just talking about, yes. Just come up to the mic, state your name, your address.
Seems like I walk up there. I pulled a hamstring, being a jock, because I'm not.
No more pickleball for him.
Listen, it was a definite new. Okay, my name is Ron Martin, I live at 44 Denbury Drive in Forked River. Listening to,
just get you sworn. You swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, under penalty of law.
sure,
All yours.
good. In listening to the conversation about the international standards, I don't know if you're aware of it, but there are international standards for traffic lights. And they've been implemented throughout the United States for the last, I don't know how many decades. So the point that was brought up is a very good point, and it raises the question of, if we continue, the town continues to do business as we have, not bearing in mind the regulations on just the fire aspect, truck radius, turning and things like that, what's the liability to the town? What's the liability to anyone that was involved in it? So when we look at this is a very broad issue. It's a very important issue. Because as we go forward, you can't suddenly say, oh, you know what, you gotta tear that down, and you gotta do this, and that's not gonna work. So I really would suggest that the process follow what the state guidelines are. That way you're in accordance with what the rules are. And nobody has to go away feeling badly. And as far as how do you enforce it, one of the things that I see as a person on the outside is that when you apply for an application for a permit to build any kind of multiple housing unit, that there be a compliance statement within that saying that all of your structures, all of your roads, all that stuff, be in compliance with the state adopted international, whatever it is, okay, fire codes. So that you have uniformity. We don't have one town doing this, one town doing that. The builders gotta have very little, I know here, coming in here on the Lacey, I do this, if I go someplace else, I do something else. So it seems that what your statement earlier is so right on the money. We've really progressed. I've only been here 8 years, but we've only been here 8 years. And we've seen the changes in town. We're no longer a cute little town. We really are. And that drives the question of, not only are you in fire compliance, what about police protection? We're bringing all these units in. We have 568 homes in our area, but then we have over 1,000 people. If you go by police chief standards or the FBI standard for a number of recommended police officers in the town is FBI 3 point something. For the police chiefs, it's 2 point something for every 1,000 people. Are we in compliance? So when you're looking at the whole thing, we're gonna peel back the onion. Let's really peel back the onion. We need to look at all the aspects of infrastructure. What's affecting us? How much water do we have? What do we do for gas? What do we do for garbage? What do you do for transportation? What do you do for entrances and exits? All those kinds of things. Now, you go down Route 9, you never wanna go to Route 9 on Saturday, Sunday, forget about that. Forget it. So we just know there's traffic. Why? Population. Why? People wanna come here. It's a nice place to live. So I offer that observation, if you will, so that we are in compliance, we have standards, that's what they are, standards, SOP, standard operating procedure. I worked in communication networks all across the globe. Did one for a big bank. Just tell you this one story. 62 countries and 175 servers. Cutoff was 2 a.m. sometime to 4 a.m. sometime. How do you coordinate the time zones? Well, that's just one aspect, getting everybody to participate. But if you have a standard, and you say it's Greenwich Mean Time, then you've got a starting point. Again, that appears to be something that the town can benefit from by capitalizing on what is available so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. That's my observation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and
I'll leave it at that.
I agree with you a little time. I've only been watching the town grow for 65 years,
Well,
so.
there you go. You've seen it. You have seen the
Yes,
dramatic
but,
rise.
and the nice thing is that a lot of the things that you were talking about, luckily, is a lot of the things we do address when we're looking at a lot of these applications. Route 9, that is the state, that's the DOT, we keep getting
We
told
won't talk
about that.
about the county. I get it.
County's got nothing to do with Route 9,
Well, he's close to the state.
even when we look at these applications as far as the egress and all that stuff, we get told, we can say whatever we want to look at it, but the DOT makes the final decision, so. But thank
Okay.
you. Anybody else in the public like to say anything? State your name, your address, and then this gentleman wants you to raise your right hand.
Hi, Helen Henderson, 5 Camelot, Portland River.
Thank you. Just write your name. I was writing in that, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth under penalty of law.
Yes.
Thank you
yeah,
very much.
thank you. I first just want to say thank you to all the volunteers on the board since talking about, these important issues that we're asking volunteers to consider. I also want to say Sue's awesome. Thank you for all the years delivering timely board agendas and items. I also want to specifically say thank you to Jim Letelier, Mr. Letelier, for mentioning that this came up at the last board meeting, which I did not know until tonight. We were here for an application last month with a lot of nearby neighbors who couldn't make it tonight, but I stayed tonight because of those two items listed as public discussion. Otherwise, I would have left again. So I appreciate that you've all taken the time to really discuss this again. So to that, my comments are, I think what Mr. Reed said earlier was my concern about them changing the language from a maximum 5-acre parcel to minimum, in that if you start doing the math, not talking about a specific application, but 10 units, if you have 100 acres, you're now looking at 1,000 units. So by making a recommendation to correct this mistake, you're really giving away a lot of control, even though you have the 10, the density of 10 units per acre. The larger acreage, the more population you're gonna get, the more units you're gonna get, the more traffic, the more fire issues, all these things, exits, traffic lights, everything that everyone was saying. And I was sitting there through the hour-long discussion thinking, we have a sign up that says maximum capacity 125 people for this room. We're not gonna have really a maximum capacity. We'll have a density, but we won't have capacity. Where right now you really have control over that capacity. I understand you're only gonna be making a recommendation. So my next comment / question is, since you had a previous discussion, is the resolution already written up, or is it being written on the fly for these board members to vote on? Or are you just sort of basing it on the ordinance change that was made on first reading? And I don't know who that question is to, but I'm just curious how this resolution, this memorialization, or whatever it's called, is going to read, and how do each of these board members feel about offering their vote on that, or recommendation as a case?
Yeah, it's a good point. How does all this discussion get into the resolution that's already drafted before the discussion?
Was the resolution
You
done?
can have my copies.
Thank you.
It was actually drafted before the discussion, because it came from the governing body who already had the discussion and voted on it, so they put it into resolution form, sent it to the board, so the board can vote yes or no on it. In a normal situation, no, resolution wouldn't be prepared, because you don't know how the board's gonna go, and the board would have total jurisdiction.
Because can I say what Mr. Quinn said? The board isn't putting conditions on it, the board is just reviewing what the town already did. That's its role here. Whereas if you sat through the other applications, the actual applications that the board has jurisdiction to say yes or no, there's the resolution will be prepared on those. It's not so much that it's made on the fly, it's really just, it's pretty straightforward. It's what is the board's recommendation as far as the ordinance that the township wants to pass.
And that would be done as a body, a planning board, as a whole, or will there be individual?
The difference, Helen, like a lot of times when we make a resolution, you'll hear us adopt it. in a case like this, when it's coming down from the township committee, all we are doing is memorializing.
They're basically gonna, if there is a vote tonight, okay, which is what's on the agenda, so it's up to the board if they're gonna vote on it. It'll just be as far as if they can't approve it, they're basically gonna, recommend it. So really, the technical language is in recommending it, they find it consistent with the township ordinance, the master plan. That's pretty-
I've heard you refer several times to, the board's purview for policy. So where is that fine line between the policy piece of this, the
Really?
responsibility of this board?
If we look clearly, I should say, if we look technically or coldly at the board's responsibilities, the board, remember what I said earlier, they can't, the members, there's discussions that involve policy, but this board is not, the planning board is not charged or really has jurisdiction over policy. That's really for the governing body of the town. So remember what was said earlier, say the board, let's not take the ordinance before us, let's just say there's an ordinance and the board unanimously says, no, we don't like the ordinance, okay? And the township committee still adopts it, and then an applicant comes before the board and that ordinance is part of the application. The board can't say, well, we don't like the ordinance. The board, think of it this way, this board is really like, it sits like a judge hearing a case, and the board makes a decision based on what the ordinance says. The board can't say, well, policy-wise, we don't like this, that's really good. Now, that's kind of like civics 101. The policy issues come up, yes, but this board does not set it. And that's not because they don't want to, that's the jurisdiction of the board. Basically, the board, here's the end, the municipal land use law, that's the state law, and the board has a master plan and the board has ordinance. Here's this, it's up to you guys to decide if this application meets that. So that's kind of, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that was a very, I appreciate the civics.
And I don't want you to think I'm talking down to you at all. I meant, it's civics 101, meaning this is just kind of how.
Yeah, so I don't see like a class 1, class 2 kind of, there's nobody here that's on the township committee, right?
But all of.
Yes.
Or,
Mr. Kennis and Mr. Dykoff.
But all.
no, I mean, but they're not here right
They're
now.
not
here today.
I just wonder how that would color the
But
conversation
that's true.
differently.
True, but the board only needs a quorum to vote
Well, I'm not talking about not voting, I'm just saying, I think it would add a very different context to this entire conversation. There is no member of the governing body who sits on this planning board here right now for this entire conversation. And they will be doing second reading and voting on Thursday. I understand people, need to bring their grievances over this ordinance at second reading to the township committee Thursday night. I understand that. I'm just sharing with you, you opened it for comment on this. I think that, I don't think we have to live with the growing pains in this instance. I think there's a lot that we can, do to, influence how the governing body considers this. I think, that's just it. I think we need a maximum capacity for all the reasons and even more. I won't even start to talk about environmental carrying capacity of the land and water and all that. And I'll have to go on like Jim for a very long time.
And you're very,
I appreciate
I don't know if
it. I
that's
learned a
about
lot.
the way it is.
Well, it's like, happy birthday to your lovely wife as well.
and how the more people there are up here, the discussions go, you've sat through some of these bigger,
Yes.
applications, and there is multiple opinions up here and discussions, and that shows the validity of even what's coming before this board in the future. Why we're trying so hard to make dates that we're all here, because there are differences of opinions on different things. Sometimes we all agree, sometimes we don't. There's losers and there's winners. But that's why, you know, especially when these big applications come before us, we try very hard to get everybody here. And whether they're an alternate that night or whatever, because everybody's here, they still have the right to their opinion, what they have to say, and their input. And we really value that along with the public. And, you know, it's nice to see the public come out when they are concerned and they see things, because we've also in the past, when we talk about resolutions, and this just happened in the last year or so, year and a half, where all of a sudden the public came out after an application was already approved and the resolution was there. And some of these are split board votes, but once a resolution is, once we approve an application and a resolution is done, and I even had questioned this earlier this year because there was one that I was hoping I could vote against the resolution and maybe get enough votes that the resolution wasn't going through. Well, that's not the way the world works. Once the resolution is written in whatever the board's vote was at that time, which is usually a meeting before, all it needs is one vote and it goes through. And I had questioned that earlier this year because I had one I felt very strongly about, found out it didn't.
So you can vote your conscience and,
Vote
you
your
know,
conscience and whatever, but that's what's nice about having multiple personalities, people from different, walks of life and educational backgrounds on these boards, which you hopefully it, gels and makes things better.
Okay, well, that's it, I, you know, don't want to go too long, and also, thank you for those great crosswalk signs by the track. Those are great.
That was, I'll tell you what, you guys deserve it.
We were as shocked as probably you.
I thought, I'm going, this just came up less than a
Have a little
month ago. I'm like, holy cow.
And don't ever
I'm
run
gonna
out.
take credit for that, I'm gonna be like, I was writing and asked for that.
I like to fly under the radar. Yeah. Don't ever make a list.
Well, if we went to last meeting,
Which one?
when Mrs. Bailey Wall came up to the mic and asked for her, and somebody, might have, as a matter of fact, I think she's sitting in the back of the room, said the commissioner's sitting right there. But, yeah, I was speechless. Well, thank you. Yeah, the only thing I see that county to do faster than that is you call me back.
Thank you for your point earlier, it was well taken, planning, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Anybody else from the public have anything to say tonight? With that, does any of the board members got anything extra? Would anybody like to go home and adjourn this meeting? Oh, wait a second, we got a memorial.
We wanna hear your conscience.
I do wanna just point something out, so the resolution, I'm just sitting here reading over it. The resolution for the second one, amending the C200 zone, in the paragraph where it says now therefore, like the third sentence from the bottom, it says, section 33561C, I think there's a little typo in that, because it says as to create a riparian zone. I don't think it should be, I don't think it should say that.
I'll let Mr.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The site is correct though, right? The
Yes,
section,
the section is correct.
So just take out to create a repair, as long as we have the correct site number.
Okay.
That's, I mean, they can vote on it and
Oh, yes.
we'll make sure that the resolution has the approved language by the board.
Okay.
Thank you.
And now these resolutions state, just so everybody understands that the board approves and recommends the adoption of each of the ordinances.
Almost forgot that after all that discussion. Yes, okay, so we got the resolution memorializing ordinance 2022-21, the redevelopment. Have a motion for that, please. Second?
Second. Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Ms. MacArthur.
Yes.
Mr. Marine.
Yes.
Mr. Nappy.
Yes,
Mr. Reed?
No.
Mr. Letelier?
No.
Mr. Bransford?
No.
Vice Chair Lorraine?
Yes. Resolution memorializing ordinance 2022-23, chapter 335 amendments.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. MacArthur?
Yes.
Mr. Marine?
Yes.
Mr. Nappy?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
No.
Mr. Letelier?
No.
Mr. Bransford?
No.
Vice Chair Lorraine?
I'm gonna say yes.
So you got a 4-3 on each?
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3.
I'm sorry, 5-3. Oh, and this one, I'm sorry, 5-3 on each, thank you, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I missed.
So that's